Chapter 19. Temporary Home. Prior to departing for the Dean farm, John Robert introduces Doc to the wagon train's leaders, Joyce and John Height. After a brief chat and some finger-pointing, they mount up and lead their half of the wagon train over to Jeffrey's to see about setting the newcomers up in his barn. Dean Family Farm, just outside of Old Town, Shenandoah Valley, Virginia Colony. Early afternoon, Monday, December 19th, 1735. Upon their arrival, Doc has the newcomers wait with their wagons while he has a private conversation with the Deans in their cabin. Upon hearing of the newcomers' dilemma, the Deans are all too happy to oblige. Margaret is the first to speak. "Why, of course they can stay in our barn. After all, we'd no even have the barn if no for help from our friends." "She's right, Doc, and we'd no have it any other way," Jeffrey adds. Doc nods, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. "I'll say this, you're good-hearted folk, and them good-hearted folk waiting outside canna thank you enough for your hospitality." "That's kind of you to say, Doc, very kind indeed. What say you introduce us?" Jeffrey asks, gesturing towards the door. They follow Doc outside, and he gets everyone's attention. With hands raised, he says, "If and I may, allow me to introduce Jeffrey and Margaret Dean. They've graciously offered to serve as your hosts until other accommodations can be made." Joyce Height steps forward, extending a hand. "Jeffrey, Margaret, Joyce Height, it's a pleasure to meet you, and on behalf of us all, thank you for your hospitality. God's blessings upon you both." Taking his hand, Jeffrey says, "The pleasure is ours, Mr. Height. I understand you folks need a warm place to bed down for a while." Height looks to the sky at the light dusting of snowflakes as they drift down around him. "Mr. Dean, truer words have never been spoken, sir, for the only shelter these folks have are tents, and none too warm." Jeffrey smiles warmly. "Well, you've come to the right place, my good man. We've more than enough room, and that furnace of mine'll keep 'em warm and cozy. Save your everyday barn odors, of course." "Sir, my lady, we're grateful for your hospitality, barn odors and all," the elder Height says with a bow. With a tilt of his head, Jeffrey replies, "Well, you're more than welcome." Looking to the sky, he adds, "And it looks like you're just in time." As flakes pepper his face, he adds, "What say we get you folks inside before it gets to blowing?" Waving his arms through the icy air, he starts barking orders to the newcomers, pointing around the yard and giving directions. "Pull your wagons yonder, and tie the horses off under the side shed." Turning for the barn, he shouts through the mystical snowdrift now consuming the yard, "I'll fire up the furnace while you folks get settled." As those not handling the wagons or horses make their way into the barn, Jeffrey directs a couple of men to set up the makeshift tables and benches the Bonners dropped off for their upcoming Christmas Day feast. While they take care of that, he stokes the furnace. Upon seeing the accommodations, several of the newcomers head back to their wagons to gather some items to help make their stay more comfortable. As the group settles in, Margaret walks over to a group of women huddled near the barn door. "I'm guessing you folks must be hungry." The women are exchanging glances when one of them steps forward and says, "'Tis safe to say." Pausing to look at her friend, she gasps, "We're absolutely famished." They break into a tension-relieving laugh, and Margaret throws her hands on her hips. "Well then, what say we fix that?" The women exchange a quick glance and nod enthusiastically. With a warm smile and a wave, Margaret says, "Follow me, ladies." With that, the women head into the cabin and get to cooking up some hot coffee and grub for everyone. Bonner Family Farm, just outside of Old Town, Shenandoah Valley, Virginia Colony. A little later that afternoon, Monday, December 19th, 1735. Meanwhile, William and the Bruce clan have just arrived at the Bonners. As they pull into the barnyard, William slides from JJ's back and hurries into the cabin. The three of them turn to him as he enters, and he quickly informs them about the newcomers and their situation. With a quick glance at his wife, Beebe says,
"Well, if you dinna mind sleeping on the floor again, I dinna mind them staying in your cabin."
With that, the Bonners follow William outside, and Beebe bellows,
"Hello, and welcome to Old Town. 'Tis a pleasure to meet you. I'm Beebe, and this here's me wife, Berta, and the quiet one yonder is our daughter, Flora."
"Sir John Robert Bruce, pleasure to meet you, sir," the stranger says, extending a hand. As they shake, he adds,
"We're much obliged, Mr. Bonner." "Dinna give it a second thought, Sir John. You folks are more than welcome."
Graciously, John Robert replies, "Mr. and Mrs. Bonner, thank you. We are forever grateful."
"We'd no have it any other way, Sir John," Berta insists.
"Aye, 'tis our pleasure. And please, call me Beebe."
"Thank you, Beebe. And please, call me John Robert." Gesturing to his wife, he says,
"And please allow me to introduce me bonny bride, Sarah."
Sarah, being accustomed to the ways of nobility, curtsies and says,
"'Tis a pleasure to make your acquaintance."
Exchanging a glance, Berta curtsies awkwardly, and Beebe bows, fumbling with his tricorn. Embarrassed for the both of them, William shakes his head, gesturing towards his cabin.
"And your temporary home is just over here. What say we head over so I can carry Mary inside and lay her on me bed?"
When he turns back to the group, he spots John Robert giving him a sharp-eyed glare. Realizing he misspoke, he retorts,
"No, I meant no disrespect."
Seeing the expressions on his and her husband's faces, Sarah pats William on the shoulder.
"'Tis fine, lad. We ken what you meant."
Giving her a smile of relief, William sighs, then hurries over to pluck Mary from the cold wagon. As he approaches the wagon, he turns on the charm.
"Miss Mary, if you'll allow me, I'd be honored to carry you into me cabin."
She giggles.
"Should I be flattered?"
At a loss for words, William looks at her speechless and blushing. Breaking the silence, she says,
"'Tis just, well, you're the first man who's ever asked me that."
William chuckles.
"To tell you true, Miss Mary, you're the only one I've ever asked. So, I'm flattered to have you sleeping in me bed, cabin."
With a twinkle in her eye, she giggles.
"I'll bet you are. And I,"
she says with a wink,
"I look forward to sleeping on that bed of yours. So, if you'd be so kind, I'd be honored if you'd carry me in, Sir Knight."
Smiling, he says,
"Then let's get you inside, shall we?"
She nods, and he confidently plucks her from the wagon and carries her in, her head once again resting on his inviting shoulder. Like carrying his bride across the threshold, he carefully enters, crosses the room, and lays Mary gently upon his bed. As he does, she gazes up at him, whispering,
"I hope I'm your only."
His heart pitter-pattering away, he stammers, "Miss Mary, you are the only." With a finger to his lips, she smiles with her eyes and whispers,
"And so are you."
Just then, her family floods into the cabin. They share a smile, and William rushes over to stoke the fire. His head is spinning, his heart is pounding, and his pulse is racing, and he knows he is entering uncharted territory. Meanwhile, Beebe has Mary's brothers, 20-year-old George and James, 15, hauling benches from the barn into William's cabin.
"Here you are, folks. Something to sit on whilst you warm yourselves by the fire."
As his teen helpers set the benches in front of the hearth, Beebe adds,
"Thank you, gents."
Just then, Berta walks in.
"Who's hungry?"
"Oh, that's very kind of you, but really, you needn't go to any trouble, Miss Berta," Sir John retorts.
"Nonsense! 'Tis no trouble at all. And please, call me Berta. Now, who'd like some hot cornbread pancakes smothered with fresh butter and honey?"
Being the hungry youngsters they are, George, James, and 13-year-old John shoot their hands in the air. Warming himself by the fire, Margaret's husband Richard raises his hand unabashedly as well. Clapping excitedly, Berta shrieks, "Wonderful!" Succumbing to the pressure, Sir John declares,
Miss Berta, cornbread pancakes would be mighty fine about now. Thank you. Your generosity will no soon be forgotten.
Smiling warmly, Berta sighs,
"Well, that's what neighbours are for, Sir John."
Sarah raises a hand.
"Might I help?" "Why, of course, dear. Cooking with friends is always more fun,"
Berta says, taking her by the hand. In the barnyard, Bebe stares up at the dark clouds and falling snow and hollers at the cabin door.
By the looks of that sky, I'll bet it snows all day. We should get those wagons of yourn inside the barn to protect your belongings, lest your things get wetter than they already are."
Standing on William's porch, John Robert hollers inside,
"Boys, fetch the trunk with the blankets and bring it inside."
Then with a wave,
"Richard, Margaret."
Without hesitation, they all jump to their feet and follow him out to the wagons. After George and James remove the trunk, John Robert, Richard, and Margaret each climb into a wagon and meet Bebe at the barn. They carefully pull the two fullest wagons inside. As the snowfall picks up, the third wagon is pulled up to the barn doors where its contents are unloaded into the barn. Dean Family Farm, just outside of Old Town, Shenandoah Valley, Virginia Colony, mid-afternoon, Monday, December 19th, 1735. While Mrs. Dean and the ladies prepare some food and coffee, Geoffrey fires up the furnace and helps his guests get settled in. The furnace is blaring when the ladies return to the barn with a small cauldron of stew, a platter of biscuits, a loaf of bread, and stacks of bowls, plates, and spoons. Cheers rise up as they set their offering on one of the tables, and Margaret calls,
"Supper's on, folks! Come and get it while it's hot."
Bonner Family Farm, just outside of Old Town, Shenandoah Valley, Virginia Colony, a little later that afternoon, Monday, December 19th, 1735. With their belongings sheltered from the elements and their horses tended to, the Bruces returned to the warmth of William's cabin to shake off the chill. Shortly thereafter, Berta and Sarah return with platters wrapped in linens. As they enter the cabin, they are greeted with cheers, whistling, and clapping. Young George confesses,
"I dinna ken what it is, but it smells divine."
Taking in a whiff of the tasty aroma, Richard echoes,
It surely do, George."
They place the platters on the table and unwrap them, releasing the smell of the deliciousness into the air. In a flash, the men are hovering over the table like a swarm of bees, mouths opened and wide-eyed. Berta blurts,
"Well, dinna stand there. Dig in."
As they move in for the kill, Berta crosses her arms and peers out the corner of her eye at Sarah.
"See, I told you they'd love it."
Topping off the offerings, Flora places a jar of local honey and a bowl of sweet, creamy butter she churned that morning in the middle of the table. Watching the men load their plates, Margaret, Anne, and even Mary, in her weary state, all start to giggle, as the sight of their boys attacking the food like a pack of ravaging refugees is beyond hilarious.
"Mind your manners, lads. We've a lot of hungry mouths to feed,"
John Robert barks. With a pat on his arm, Berta says, "No to worry, John Robert. There's plenty more where that came from. So please, eat to your belly's content." And with that, the group digs in. Loaded up, they each find a spot and sit with their plates in their laps, stuffing their hungry pie holes. The only sounds, that of utensils scraping plates and an occasional satisfied sigh. In between bites, young George professes,
"Miss Berta, never have pancakes tasted so good."
"Hear, hear!" the men cheer. Bellies full, the group rests comfortably with hot cups of coffee by the hearty fire as it crackles and pops. While sipping their mugs, the group enjoys getting to know each other, sharing stories and laughter. About an hour into their fellowship, William stands and excuses himself. While getting to know the newcomers is important, William knows there will be time for that later. Right now, however, he is fixed on the problem no one is talking about. The fact that his new friends cannot stay in his cabin forever. With winter already upon them, he needs to rally the community to help erect their cabins. With that in mind, he heads out to the barn, mounts JJ, and heads out. For the next several hours, with snow softly falling on the Shenandoah, he rides from one neighbor to the next, putting his plan in motion. Several hours later, he returns to the farm. As he rides up to the barn, he runs into Beebe, who asks,
"Where in blazes have you been?"
"Freezing me bloody arse off, that's where."
"I should say, you've been gone for hours. You canna fool me, lad. I ken when you're scheming on something. So out with it. What are you up to?" Beebe says with a one-eyed stare.
"I was out with a lady friend sipping whiskey in the woods, you nosy old coot."
"Lady me arse. The only lady you're interested in is laying next door in that bed of yourn."
"That's gibberish."
"Gibberish me arse. I saw you eyeballing that lovely young lass. You canna fool me. You're sweet on her."
Just then, Berta, who was listening at the barn door, steps forward and chimes in.
"Ha!"
Beebe spins to her.
"Berta, you startled me."
Throwing her hands on her hips, she barks,
"Surprise, idiot! I lives here."
While her husband sucks down his pride, she turns to William.
"And there's no point denying it, lad. We all saw how you were looking at each other. Beebe's right. You're sweet on her."
William fecklessly protests.
"But,"
Berta waves him off.
"But nothing, lad. She's as lovely as they come."
Then with a wink she adds,
"But what she sees in you, I dinna ken."
Embarrassed, William looks at the ground, pinching his lips with his fingers.
"Was it that obvious?"
Berta giggles.
"As the nose on your face, lad." "Good Lord! Do you think her parents noticed?"
Beebe crows.
"Well, her dad didn't shoot you, so if he did, he didn't seem to mind."
Still giggling, Berta says,
"And you didn't hear it from me, but I think her sister's a bit jealous. Her husband paid more mind to me pancakes than to her."
Grabbing his stomach, William moans.
"I think I'm going to be sick."
With a sarcastic wave, Beebe groans.
"Perfect." "Shut it!" Berta barks.
"I just couldn't help it. She's so beautiful,"
Berta says, finishing his sentence. William pauses.
"Perfect, I'd say."
"Hands over heart," Berta sighs.
"Perfect indeed. As God is my witness, the moment I set eyes on her, I melted like butter on pancakes."
Shattering his moment, Beebe blurts,
"Enough about her. We ken you're smitten. You'll be fine."
Just then, Flora enters and with a Cheshire cat grin says,
"So, me big brother's smitten. Honestly, I never would have believed it, and yet I saw it with me own eyes. William, you're head over heels."
William glares at her, but she keeps on giggling like little sisters do. Interrupting their banter, Beebe barks,
"Since we ken you've no been sipping whiskey in the woods with your Scottish princess, where in blazes have you been?"
"That's what I came to tell you. I've been out rallying our friends to help these folks build their cabins and get them the hell out of Jeffrey's barn."
"I see you conveniently omitted the part about getting that Mary girl out of your cabin," Beebe chirps.
"Hush your mouth, husband. Can he no see he's trying to do some good? So, tell us, have any luck?" "Well, with Christmas this weekend and Hogmanay the next, 'tis going to be tough. But if all goes well, I think we can get a building party together no later than mid-January, but likely no sooner with everyone being so busy. Nevertheless, they all said they'd help when the time comes. We just need to tell them when and where. Trouble is, we dinna ken what the weather will be."
"No to mention all the lumber we'll be needing to harvest before then," Beebe adds.
"Aye, so I thought tomorrow I'd take 'em out to their parcels and get the lay of the land. We can start with that and see where it goes from there."
"I ken they're resting, but perhaps we should run it by 'em," Beebe suggests.
"Indeed,"
William says, turning for the door.
"Just hold your britches, gents. Me stew's nearly done. Sarah's watching over it now, but when it's ready, We can take it over and discuss your idea over supper, Berta insists.
As snow blankets the valley, the Bruce clan sits comfortably snuggled in William's cabin, getting some much-needed rest. When Berta's venison stew and biscuits are ready, the Bonners and Sarah carry it all over to William's cabin, and they break bread with their new friends. As the biscuits are being passed around the table, William starts the ball rolling.
I were thinking tomorrow we could ride out and have a look at your property.
John Robert rests his spoon on the edge of his plate, thinking.
Aye, 'tis a fine idea, William. Snow or no, we need to see what we're dealing with. I propose we ride to the Dean's first thing and see if any of your friends wish to join us.
Swallowing a mouthful of stew, John Robert points with his spoon and replies.
Aye, good idea, William declares. It's settled then. We head out first thing in the morn.
While William and Mary spend the remainder of the evening exchanging glances, the Bonners and their new friends become better acquainted, their conversations and storytelling lasting well into the evening, all while resting and warming themselves by the fire with a jug of McGregor's finest.